Welcome to the Reverberations podcast, where we explore the human experience and the journey of self-discovery. Well, thank you for joining another edition of Reverberations. This is your host, John Stewart. It's such an honor and a pleasure to welcome a very special guest today, Vaishnavi Brassey. Vaishnavi is a singer of the sacred, a playful voice worker, and a highly attuned nervous system worker. Her voice has been described as a flute that the divine uses to carry heart-penetrating beauty. And her music has also been described as a divine transmission of heartfelt devotional mantra music. It's such a joy to have her here. Vaishnavi and I were actually woven together through a project that was so divinely orchestrated with Deb Stanley, who does quantum womb healing, and she was calling in these codes. And a mutual friend of ours, Katie Felton, who is in the program with Deb's, had shared with Deb's, hey, I've got someone that might be able to do the music for this. And it just so happens that Vaishnavi was a singer and songwriter. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be quite an experience to work together. So we came together. She's in the UK, I'm in the US, and talking about how we would have this collaborative project come together for the Queen Code of Woon. I had written the track, sent it over to her, and she recorded the vocals. And if you guys stay all the way to the end, you're in for a treat just to hear her angelic voice of bringing this divine feminine to life, and this birthing is so potent. And I'm so excited to have this conversation today because of the depth of the work that Vaishnavi is of service to the feminine, to the world in general. So Vaishnavi, thank you so much for being here. Again, it's such an honor to have this conversation that we've been just so charged with bringing to surface. Share with us a little bit about yourself, your journey, what you're of service to, and what's going on in your world now.
Oh, thank you so much, John. Wow. I'm just sitting here with a big grin on my face because I'm just hearing you recalling the magical kind of vortex in which we were woven together. It's really been a journey, and it's such a delight to be here with you today. So it's also a really interesting time because I have been in a kind of chrysalis since I don't know how familiar you are with the Celtic year, but it's something that has been growing in my awareness, but it's not like something I was really brought up with. But it turns out that since Imbolc, which is around the 1st or 2nd of February, this 6-month period opened, and I was staying in the woods in this structure for 6 months, and it ended exactly on Lammas, which is around the 2nd of August. So I've just been in this kind of chrysalis, really reimagining everything. And so it's been a really interesting invitation to come and speak with you today, because in certain way, I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth, and I'm almost as curious maybe as you are to discover what I'm going to say. So the real kind of golden thread for me in this lifetime has been through my voice, and obviously, as you introduced me as a singer, but I did not sing until I was close to 30 years old. I was very shy growing up and very nervous, and it wasn't a natural thing, and I honestly imagined that was just how it was. I would go to my grave not a singer, not realizing this longing that was in me, and I used to see other people who were singers and just think, oh, they're a singer and I'm not a singer. And so there's been this great deep journey for me that has been very woven in with my opening to the divine mother and the goddess and the divine feminine, I could maybe say that it's really like my opening my heart to the divine mother is what brought through my voice. And that's a whole other big story, but maybe we'll get there. So for sure, I carry this real passion around having walked a path from I'll never sing, I'm not a singer, that's impossible, to a place now where I could perform for thousands or record with, collaborate with people in other countries. It's really like a dream that I never imagined would be happening. And so I have this real heart passion for sharing that awakening, if you like, with others. So to support and empower particularly women, as it's happened. That hasn't been a conscious thing, but to reclaim the voice or claim the voice that that they have, that we all have, that I know we all have a voice, and there's this misconception that some of us carry that, oh, that's not me, I don't have a voice, I'm not a singer, I won't sing. And so there's been a big through line for me around holding space for others to step in and discover. And I put that on pause 6 or 7 years ago. I ran a retreat that was wonderfully successful, and people had big awakenings, but I started to realize in that process that I didn't really have enough understanding of or experience around trauma and how to hold that. And my experience with working with voice is that it can really dislodge and open up deep terror or wounds or fears within people. And I started to recognize the responsibility that I hold as a facilitator or space holder. So I really have been on my own path for maybe the last 7 years, and that's led me into embodiment, which I guess in hindsight is obvious, but at that point I didn't really understand consciously how important settling more deeply into my body would be and is for the voice. So there's a lot I could say about an incredible, wonderful journey that I've been on personally. And I'm now at this place where I feel very confident in holding my own trauma if it arises, or working. I've done a lot of work in the last couple of years, one-to-one and in small groups online. Essentially, you could call it trauma healing loosely. I mean, it's I've been offering a 6-month container with 5 women. It's been a very, very deep, intimate, sweet, transformational space. And that's not been anything to do with voice. That's actually something I've done through another container that I was invited into. So where I'm at right now is this, kind of like, I just had an image of 2 rivers meeting. You get those rivers that are different colors, don't you, and they flow along together. And it's like I'm bringing together my history with voice, but also now the riches of what I've experienced so deeply myself with embodiment work.
There's so much that you just shared there that I would love to touch upon. A few things. First and foremost is thank you for finding your voice, or remembering your voice, right? Because the one thing that you shared is, I'm not a singer. I can deeply, deeply resonate with that. I have felt that way throughout my life. I'm not a musician. I'm not a singer. And I'll share this story with you because I find it so powerful, because of how it impacts us in the trauma. You spoke to trauma and how it can dislodge fear, though also how the trauma can be embedded. So in 8th grade, I was asked to do a solo for Sound of Music. Nobody wanted to do the solo. It was actually a soprano role. The lead was a female. She backed out the last moment, asked who else wanted to do it. Nobody volunteered. I was a soprano, and I was like, you know what? I got this. I'll do it. And I was so excited, and everybody was excited for me. Then I go out there and I sit on the edge of the stage. And when I'm sitting on the edge of the stage, everything gets quiet, and I proceed to sing Sound of Music. I thought I did very well. Again, everybody, the crowd's having a great time and applause and all of that. And I just feeling the rush. Well, I get back to school that following Monday, and I got made fun of to the next degree. Sissy, all the things that you could imagine, right? I'm singing a soprano role, a female solo, and I vowed to never sing again. And I didn't. And I didn't realize the impact that it had on me, such a deep, profound impact, right? To the point of where, I was invited to special chorus in our high school, and I was very close with the music teacher at our high school and choral instructor. And he tried everything to get me to come back to singing. Nope, not going to do it. I'm done. That's it. I'm never going to have that ever happen to me ever again. So I find it fascinating that through our traumas, we find our strength. And I really value and appreciate your story, because there's so many people out there that have this happen in their childhood, whether it's children are to be seen and not heard, or where our voice is muted, where what we have to share is invalidated, or it's made to feel like we're not good enough. So it's such a travesty to see how this world has suppressed so many people's voices. So when I hear like, I'm not a singer, it touches me. And it touches me in a way because I've heard your voice and I've witnessed the power. And it's out of that crucible of like, whatever we want to call it, the darkness, the trauma, the pain, whatever that is, that births so much. So what led you to singing? What was, like, you said one thing that I'm sure it's going to come through that was so powerful, is that the Divine Mother was pulling through my voice. But like when you were 30, what was that like? How did that come about?
Great. Yeah, I would really love to share that part of the journey. And before I do, I really want to just speak to how touched I am to hear your story, and having also heard your voice. And it really touches me to hear that direct experience and, really sense your understanding. And I hope it's okay to speak into this as we're recording this. We're on video, we can see each other. And I just caught a glimpse at one point as you were speaking into the shame of, being teased and ridiculed. It was like I could almost see the young boy in your body. There was just this split second when he was there, like it was his head hanging down a little bit, and like shielding from the input. And I hope it's okay to name that, because it
Absolutely.
really touched me to witness that. And what I'd love to speak to, just before I go on to talk more about my journey, is how we hold, someone came up with a wonderful phrase the other day, the issues in our tissues.
Mm,
Experiences get completely embedded and crystallized in our physical body and held there, and can stay there for our whole lives if we never, touch them. And we learn how to somehow move our bodies around them so they don't get disturbed, because they're really frightening when we dislodge them. And what I just love to share for the listeners is, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but I think it bears repeating, because as you say, most of us grow up, even with very loving parents with the best of intentions, we will get the message, I don't want to hear that now. I don't want you to say it like that. I don't, everything, that we just get these micro suppressions coming at us all day long, and especially at school. And it's, teachers have a hard time keeping a huge room full of students quiet so they can teach. So there's a kind of onslaught as we grow up of silencing. And what really unlocked something for me was to understand something called procedural memory. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'd love to hear about it.
It's basically that we have conscious memory, like, oh, when I was in 8th grade, I went, I did this solo, and I went in the next day and was teased to, the nth degree. You can remember that consciously, but there's a different kind of memory, which is essentially unconscious, and that is the issues and tissues. That's how, when we learn to drive after a number of months, we're doing it unconsciously. Essentially, we can kind of be thinking about something completely different, and we find ourselves at a junction and we think, wow, I don't remember actually driving here. But that's because our body knows how to drive. And what happens with traumatic experience is that our body learns very instantly to not let that happen again. Like, that felt like death, to be turned on by my entire community, which is, your entire world. When you're in 8th grade, your school and your community, if you're going to get rejected from that, that's death, And so that's a huge impact on the nervous system, and it immediately goes, right, we're never doing that again. Never.
Yeah.
And so it just decides, okay, lock down, don't do singing. Singing is death. It sounds kind of, I'm laughing about it, but it's serious. And most of us have had this at some point. I hear so many stories like yours, and I have my own version of that. And as I say, for some people it's more little and often, but just repeated. And so what I tell people who are experiencing this is, if you're not singing, that's perfect. Like, your system is really taking care of you to make sure that you do not risk that kind of humiliation or rejection, or that feeling of social relational death. And one of the reasons I most like to work in groups is because I feel that this kind of trauma, well, at least it's my experience observing, needs to be unwound relationally, because it's generally laid down in a family, in a school, in some kind of tribal situation where there's ridicule and shame and humiliation. And what I like to do is create a safe space for people within a social relational field to take those baby steps of risking exposing and showing themselves vocally. And then the system starts to learn, okay, I didn't die. In fact, I was met with smiles and celebration, and that's how we start to rewrite that procedural memory, which isn't easy. I'll be honest, it needs some repetition to rewrite that. It's laid down instantly. You have one experience like that your body registers as potential death, it's locked in. And then the repair process is a longer, more gradual, gentle sort of way out. So I just wanted to speak to that, because I think I judged myself. Why am I so afraid of singing? Why do I go bright red and my throat locks down and I can't make a sound? Like when I'm at home in the shower, a nice sound comes out, but if there's another human present, I'm like completely, that was my experience. So I would beat myself up internally, and I think a lot of people don't understand why it's so difficult. And I really want to, if there's one message for people to take home today, that if you struggle with singing, or with anything, it could be your thing is dancing, or it could be writing, or anything. We have these places in life that bring up what seems like unreasonable terror. And I just want to explain that physiologically it's reasonable. Like, the animal body is just doing its best to survive us and protect us. And there is a way through, but it's with love and self-compassion rather than self-criticism, which I've been very good at historically.
Thank you so much for that. It's so powerful to hear the stories, you know, and like you said, you know, it's the body keeps score, right? You know, it's embedded. And I love that, the issues in the tissues. And it's so true. And the thing that I actually the one nugget that I love that you shared there is, if you're not singing, that's perfect. Right?
Exactly.
Like that's so beautiful, because now we have something to work with, right? You know, it's almost like, you know, when I played on sports teams, I was a tennis player. When I was coaching, I heard the voice of one of my prior coaches saying to me, he's like, you know, I always like getting new players because they don't have any bad habits. You know, I get to mold them, right? So it's like, well, if we're not singing yet, we're consciously aware of it, but now we get to move through that. We get to like activate what is there and move through it together and come alive in that space, because there is an incredible power that happens when we access it. You know, we transmute that fear. And when we utilize our perceived greatest weakness, it then can become our greatest strength. You know, it's like heal thyself. So thank you so much for sharing that.
This is a great segue, in fact, to maybe revisit your original question. I'm
Yeah,
just,
I was going to lean back into that, because I'm very curious about what, you know, what that is for you.
yeah, well, I think there's a number of things you touched on there that I want to try and fold back into what I'm about to say, which is I've lost the thread of one, but it'll come back. But this kind of Achilles heel piece of your greatest weakness and your greatest strength. I imagine, I don't know if this is true, but it feels true in my experience, that the reason I was so locked down around singing was because I had, like you, been very teased, similar age as well, lying in bed in my boarding school listening to Kate Bush on my Walkman and kind
Uh,
of squeaking along to Wuthering Heights, and my dorm mates just ripping the piss out of me. And it really, it
yeah,
lodged. And I think it lodged so deeply because I've just, singing has always been a love, and music has been just a soul resonance from as long as I can remember. I mean, my parents say they played me classical music in the womb, and there was a lot of awareness, and there was a piano growing up, and my father particularly has a real love of music, so I definitely grew up with that. But for instance, I remember watching an extraordinary cellist called Paul Tortelier playing the cello when I was maybe 8, and watching television, and I was transfixed. He was playing Elgar's cello concerto, and like, there's no words for this kind of transcendent experience I had. And thankfully, my father registered that, and he signed me up for cello lessons, and I did learn to play the cello in a way. That was the voice that I had in those days. I feel the reason it got so shut down was because it was so important to me. And if maybe I'd been teased about my tennis playing, for me that wasn't such a big thing. So maybe I would have got through that. I don't know. So to come back to your question, I I harbored this just longing, and what I could say is almost like there was no squashing it. It's kind of like how weeds come up through the cracks in pavements, like however much weed killer or people walking on them or paving stones, they just keep coming up to the light. And somehow my soul was born to sing, and I guess I knew that on some level, but my conscious personality and my procedural memory had decided, nope, we're not going to risk that again. So trying to think how to not make this a super long story. The longing was starting to awaken around, I must have been around, I guess it's the Saturn return age, kind of around 28, 29. And I remember doing something that now sounds hilarious, but it was the only way I could do it, was I wanted to sing to someone, but it was just too terrifying. And so I phoned my best friend on speakerphone, like with the handset down in my room. I just pressed the button and phoned her. And I told her what I was going to do. And I didn't want her to speak. And I just dialed her number. And then I sat on the other side of the room and I played her and sang a song. And that was the only way I could share my voice at that time, was to kind of fool myself that no one was in the room and no one was witnessing. And actually, as I say that, I love my ingenuity, that I found this way to just bring the voice out of the box. And so this was awakening for me. And I was taking some very little steps like that, trying to share it where I could. And then what happened really essentially was I met, I don't know if you're familiar with Amma.
Yeah, yeah.
Known as the hugging saint. Yeah, hugging mother. So I stumbled across Amma in London, and honestly, my mind thought the whole thing was ridiculous. And who was this weird Indian woman hugging people? And I had all sorts of cynical judgments about it. I'd done a science degree. I was very empirical. I wasn't interested in all this spiritual stuff, but something had taken me there. And would you believe it? 6 months later, I happened to be in Kerala, which is where her ashram is based. And I happened to have picked up a boyfriend who was inspired by her and wanted to go and meet her. And I really wasn't keen, but he was so insistent that I was kind of like, okay, I'll come for a few days. And to cut a long story short, something that I have no real a logical explanation for, but it was like my heart just blew open whilst I was there. And having been very much in my head, very academic, very much focused on my intellect and my analytical mind, and it just, it just all kind of fell open. I didn't know what was happening to me, and it was disorientating, but beautiful. And that was really a massive awakening for me. And as you said, a remembering it. I see now it was always there in me, but it was very buried, my spiritual soul heart. And you may know that one of Amma's main practices is bhajan, or devotional singing. I wasn't interested in that at all. Every evening, 6:30 to 8, they would all be singing, and I would just go to my room and have a rest. I was just like, not interested. But just shortly before I left, a young girl, I would guess around 8 or 9, sang a bhajan in the temple one night, and we could hear from our room. There was a loudspeaker, and I don't know if you know a bhajan called Jai Radha Madhava, because it's quite widely sung. And hearing this child's voice with such purity, I've got chills just describing it now. It just, again, unlocked something in my soul, awoke something, and suddenly I was like, yes. And it kind of shattered whatever defense I'd been carrying around. And I found myself traveling across the US, following Amma's tour. This was in 2005, I think. Wonderful adventure, which I could go into, but just bathing in that devotional field, where then you're having devotional music from, I don't know, 9, 10 in the morning till midnight or later, and just sort of being steeped in that divine mother energy. And at the end of that time, I went to stay at her. There's an ashram in the Bay Area, and I was doing some service work there, some seva, and kind of in this devotional honeymoon period. Like, here I was, the former cynical scientist, just suddenly just in love with everything and everyone, and
I love it.
and the Divine Mother. And there they had a small bhajan every night, probably same sort of time, or kind of, I don't know, 7:30, 8 p.m. in the evening. And it was just a small group of people. And their kind of policy, if you like, was everyone lead something. Even if you're a total beginner, doesn't matter, it's just about the devotion, just go for it. And actually, it's very sweet sharing this with you, because this is a piece that I don't want to go into too much cultural cliches, but in England, it's different. You do get kind of this sort of snide, critical kind of like, oh, you don't want to make a fool of yourself, and this kind of who do you think you are kind of thing is much stronger here, I would say. Um, there I was in California with people being so encouraging and so kind, and it's really like, great job, you did really well, and really encouraging me. And I basically had this kind of loving boot camp in how to sing in front of other humans for 2 months, where every evening I was lovingly invited to share a devotional song. Not maybe every evening, pretty much. And initially it was terrifying. I would, my throat would seize up, all of the, stuff I spoke into. But there was something that was pulling my voice through me, which was the devotion and which was the love. And actually, this reminds me what I wanted to spiral back around was when you spoke about tennis players, having new tennis players that haven't developed bad habits. I had had no singing lessons. I had had no real singing experience. And my singing training came through love. It came through devotion. It came through me singing to God, basically. And I feel so blessed and so graced, almost that I was almost protected in this lifetime from any mental ideas around vocal technique, because I've had none of that. I've had an apprenticeship with the goddess,
Yes.
and she, I believe, has pulled this, what people describe as kind of otherworldly voice out through me. And quite honestly, it was disorientating and confusing for me initially, because suddenly this extraordinary voice was singing through me that I had no frame of reference for, no experience of, and it was also coming through in all these different Indian languages, because that's what I was doing. It was almost like being possessed, or channeling someone else, and part of me was completely delighted and elated and awestruck, and at other times I was like, I don't know I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how this is happening. And it was a, a little bizarre, honestly, for maybe a year or even longer. Um, so there's more that, unfolded after that time, but that's kind of really the catalyst and the awakening and um, the opening, basically,
Yeah.
was that extraordinary period of grace that, just telling you the story, it touches me so much to reflect on how that was contrived. It couldn't have been a more perfect, sweet, loving container for me to awaken my voice within, and honestly, that's what I'm now endeavoring to recreate for others to step into. That's what we need, something ongoing, a continuity with a loving tribe to reflect back our goodness and our preciousness, and yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
Thank you so much for sharing that. There's so many potent moments of expression that you shared in your journey there. And I want to reflect back on a few of them, of when you were talking about like being protected, right? Of when the person hasn't sung yet. In your case, we'll speak of your journey, of where you had felt protected from that. Yet there was like this wellspring that's just like ready to come alive, this reservoir of brilliance. And I use this analogy often, when it comes to the birthing process of something. Imagine a tea kettle. We put it on the stove, we turn the heat up, and then we sit there and we witness and we wait. The water, it's getting warmer. You start to see some steam coming through the little hole in the top. Then you start hearing those little pops, right? You know that, oh, something's happening then there. Something's going on. Something's cooking. You know the pressure is building.
Yeah.
It's building and it's building and it's building. And then all of a sudden the top starts to flicker a little bit. More steam is coming out. And then all of a sudden it starts to whistle. And it's just, it comes alive in that moment, right? It gives a sound to what has been laid dormant in that pressure cooker of what desires to come alive. And your experience is like, as you were going through that, I could feel it. You know, when you were talking about being in the dorm room, then when you were talking about being, I'm just going to put it on speaker and go to the other side of the room and just pretend no one's actually there, you know, and the pressure is building, but there's the slow release. And then all of a sudden, being in the ripe environment of feeling the support, of feeling the tenderness, of feeling seen, of feeling received and encouraged to that it's okay. It's okay. And that's, you know, one of the things that I want to lean into here is the power of devotion and the power of mantra, the power of Bhakti Yoga, right? And interestingly enough, when I was sharing the story about when I was in 8th grade and I was made fun of, this was 2 months ago that I shared the story. I hadn't been to kirtan in about 3 years. Okay. And only for the reason, part due to pandemic and, you know, things shutting down, and then, you know, part due to being busy and not necessarily choosing the time to go because I wasn't ready to have my voice activated in that capacity. To rewind a little bit, what I did do, chose to shut my voice down due to external influences, which is my choice, right? It was my choice. It's not what people did. I allowed for that to happen. Though what I did do is I found other channels to express myself. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful for the channeling of that to come alive in my music production and my DJing. And I actually went into hip hop. So I was like, if I can't sing, then I'm going to rap, you know? So I'm gonna get it out somehow. Though the fascinating thing is when you're speaking to this, it's a very current and alive situation for me because I went to kirtan 2 weeks ago and I found myself being in that same, it was like I was sitting there and I'm like humming the mantra, you know, like, you know, it's like, you ever watch the movie Elf?
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So if you're into funny Will Ferrell movies, it's outstanding. But there's this one moment at the end, and the father in the movie, they're all singing a Christmas song, right? And he's kind of just lip syncing it, kind of muttering some stuff. It's like, you're not singing. Come on. He's like, I am singing, you know, and he really wasn't. And then all of a sudden he starts to come alive and the spirit, and he starts singing, and then magic happens. I'm not going to give it away because it's
I'll watch it.
the power of the voice, right? When it starts to come alive, we come alive. Our vibration literally emanates from our being. We talk about, you know, if we talk about the throat chakra, we go from our crown, our divine download, right? Unseen, unfelt. We go into our third eye, our visual capacities. We can see, we can have our insight, we can have our vision, but we can't necessarily touch it. There's no tangible essence to it. Though when we get down to our throat chakra and our voice, if we put our hand in front of our mouth, we can literally feel the manifestation of the vibration on our hand. Not even just the air, the compression of air, the expression of it. We can feel the vibration I don't want to get too far away from where we were going. So I would love for you to speak to the power of devotion, the power of mantra, the power of Bhakti Yoga, and how that has shaped your future self at that point. Because now, like you were saying, you're of service to this capacity to help other people reclaim and remember their power and their voice. And what a gift that is to utilize.
Mhm. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. This is so rich. I'm just delighting in this exchange. And I feel like there was something you mentioned that I wanted to reflect, but well, we'll see. Um, this is funny because I'm realizing that I skipped a whole chunk, but this is the perfect moment to bring in my history. It seems so long ago. That there was a pre-awakening phase that I went through, which was, I guess the reason I missed it out is because I was less aware that it was happening in a certain way. And it's very much around devotion and mantra. So I began a Kundalini Yoga teacher training, and I was not interested in all this noise making they did in Kundalini Yoga. I'd been to a few Kundalini Yoga classes. I felt great afterwards. I didn't know what the noise making piece was. I wasn't familiar
Yeah.
with that. I'd been a hatha yogi, and I really wasn't into that part. But I felt good, and it seemed really potent. So I decided to jump into this training that I was, reserved around the sounding part. I mean, now I can look back in hindsight and see, yeah, there was a part of me that was terrified and threatened by being asked to make sound. But I didn't know that at the time, so my mind was like, no, this is weird. And so on our training weekends, we would be up at 4:30 every morning to start 2.5 hour sadhana practice. For those Kundalini yogis out there, they'll know what I'm referring to. And there's a good hour and 10 or 15 minutes of chanting, just pure mantra chanting, just mantra. It's just, now I would say it's exquisite. But that was like my dread. It's like,
Yeah.
oh God, we have to get up at the crack of dawn and sing for more than an hour. Oh, and it was like, that was the piece I was enduring. I just wanted to get to the yoga because I
Right.
thought that yoga was everything else that you did with your body. So
Mm.
it really makes me laugh to reflect back on those first 2 or 3 weekends of the training where I was kind of gritting my teeth and resenting this, enforced noise making.
Yeah.
And of course, you can guess by the end of the training, it was the absolute highlight, and I was starting to find my voice in the safety of that container where I knew it wasn't a performance. No one could maybe even hear me because we were all chanting together, like kirtan, and the power of mantra. I mean, those mantras. Kundalini yoga hasn't been my practice for many years, but those mantras are so deep in my heart. In fact, a friend is releasing a CD of sadhana mantra early next year, which I played and sang on with such delight, because that's been such a part of my history. Those mantras, yeah, were like pre-awakening phase, or maybe that's the first awakening phase. So that was an extraordinary. Yeah, I didn't understand it at the time, but now I know that the mantra and the devotion and just the context of group worship, really, which I had no frame of reference for, in the sense of I grew up nominally going to church for, Christmas carols or when my grandmothers dragged me, but both my parents were pretty much atheists. And in fact, my father was very extremely angrily atheist, and I followed his sort of path. And interestingly, though, when you spoke about the Elf movie, the one time I sang really in my childhood was Christmas carols. I would go to
Mm.
church and I would sing my heart out the top of my lungs and sing all the harmonies. And it was like I couldn't quite match it because in my mind I was like, this isn't, I wasn't into the whole Christian God thing. But just the melodies and the singing with a group of people and hearing all the voices together and the harmonies, and that just that aspirational, and it's devotion. I didn't know it then, I didn't understand it then, but to come together and sing our hearts out, that's, it was kirtan in the church. So yes, that's absolutely, I would say, the kind of key points of the awakening of the voice have been all for me around the devotion. And there's a wonderful little nugget I'll share with you in a moment, which you may know, but just to finish that piece, again, I want to just share this to normalize this for others. So where I found myself at the end of my Kundalini yoga training was I didn't ever intend to teach. I just wanted to do a real deep immersion, deep dive in yoga. And then I found myself at a small festival where the yoga teacher was unable to show up at the last minute, and everyone was terribly disappointed, including me. And I found myself saying, well, I could try teaching. I was very tentative, very shy. I was really nervous. But I led a class on the first morning, and to my amazement, everyone came up to me at the end and asked me questions as though I was a yoga teacher. And I was like, oh, it's working. And so that began a little career for 5 or 6 years of teaching a lot of yoga. But as part of that, I had to chant, because in Kundalini Yoga, you lead chants, and I had to do it audibly so that my students could follow. And I very much have a kind of responsible side, and maybe a bit of a perfectionist of wanting to do everything well. And so I had to sing, and I had to sing well, as in I had to project my voice out, and it had to be in tune, and it had to be, audible. And I could do that in a class when I was the teacher, and it was my duty, my role, my service. That was how I could serve my students best, was to chant audibly. And I could not sing a note outside of a classroom setting. If it was like anything, any other context, again, my throat would seize up, I would go bright red, and no sound would come out. It was like this night and day
Trust, yeah.
thing that went for several years, like 3 or 4 years. I could chant in a class, nowhere else. So that was actually the sort of prelude to then meeting Amma. So then that was when the next phase sort of took me to the next level. But yeah, to be of service to my students, and to be chanting mantra with devotion, the voice was there. Yeah. And that was absolutely it. And just on this theme, again, there's lots more I could say about devotion, because the piece I shared with Amma was just the beginning. I then went on to live in her ashram in India for 4 years almost at a stretch, and was deeply immersed in that devotional practice, not just the kirtan, but also chanting something that's the Sri Lalita Sahasranama, which is the 1,000 names of the Divine Mother. And it's about 50 minutes to an hour of solid Sanskrit, chanting the names of the goddess, and it's so powerful. And I believe that has been, there was a point where I chanted that every day for maybe 2 or 3 years at least, and I believe that has been my vocal training.
Yeah.
Because what it takes to chant solidly for an hour every day, that was my voice workout. So yeah, that's another, my devotional voice workout. But this piece I'd love to drop in when I remember it. Much later on my journey, I trained with an English voice worker called Chloe Goodchild, who has you may have heard, she has something called the naked voice, and she's an extraordinary force of nature, and there's definitely another catalyst for me opening later down the line. But she introduced me to the musical modes, which I knew nothing about. I didn't really have much music training. And just briefly, for those listening, minor and major are musical modes, and then there are many others that well, thousands, if not more than thousands in Indian raga, but in the Western European music, I believe it's the six or seven modes, seven. So Chloe has studied them over years and attributed emotional resonances and tones to each mode. And simply, we could say a major is kind of happy and minor is kind of melancholic and sad. And there's one mode called, I hope I've got this right now, it's a long time since I thought about it, I think it's the Mixolydian, which she calls the devotional mode. And she just says that, that's just the naturally devotional scale. And when I was learning about this was many years later when I had started to write some songs of my own. I went through all the songs I'd written to analyze them and work out what modes they were in, because I had no idea what a mode was when I was writing these songs. They just came to me. And I found that every single song I had written except one was in this devotional mode, the Mixolydian mode. I'd never even heard of this mode. I honestly, when she played the scale, it sounded kind of weird, but all the songs I had written in this very devotional phase of my life were in a mode that she ascribes to devotion. And just as a little tailpiece, the one song that wasn't, the working title was My Angry Song, and that was in the Phrygian, which she would describe as the mode of passion, anger, this kind of thing. So yeah, that's a little bit of musical
Love it.
magic for you.
I love it. And thank you for bringing Chloe Goodchild. It's fascinating as we talk, and I'm learning more about you. I'm learning more about myself, right? And we all have medicine for each other, and the reflection pieces, and the storylines that we share. And it's like, oh, wow, that's right. So I did a course with Chloe as well, the Awakening Through Sound. And that was back in 2012, 2013, when I was essentially finding my voice again, and more in the public space, not necessarily through singing, but it was through, I wanted to be able to be more confident with my speaking and how I was engaging. One of the key moments of my life of where I recognized that there was noise that was running in the background of my subconscious, and I needed to clear the noise. I needed to dissolve that, and I needed to harmonize the internal and the external. So the harmony of the spheres, right? And I went to India as well. I went and studied Nada Yoga. For those that aren't familiar with Nada Yoga out there, it's the yoga of sound, and utilizing mantra and utilizing different tones and bija mantra and fundamental frequencies, and how to utilize that with hatha. And I was so nervous going into it. And then there was, like, everybody in there had professional singing experience. Me, here's the 8th grade boy that's like, oh, hell no, I have to use my voice. And it was so encouraging from them, though what really did it was what you shared of when I was able to piece together what I knew with what I was feeling, with the power of the group. In mantra, it's let all of what we know go. Let it all go and dissolve into the power of the devotion. It's what's happening beyond, right? Transform is beyond form. And when I felt the power of the group in the voice and all of the different expressions, the opera singer, the trained vocalist, the crone energy of, the elder with just the depth and the richness and all of these different expressions. And I'm the only male in there. So you could hear me pretty clearly, or when I wasn't, you could hear that I wasn't involved, right? So I'm like, shit. If I don't do anything, they're going to know. If I do something, they're going to know. Well, there's more fear in not doing it, because then I'm going to be called out. So I started leaning into that. And what allowed me was my power of devotion. It was the heart-centered connection that, because you spoke to it as well, my protection because of what happened is I had to be perfect. And I had to do it in a way that other people would receive it. And if they didn't receive it, then I wasn't good enough. I wasn't worthy. And I wasn't going to be validated or liked, or I was going to be made fun of again. And I realized in that moment that even the person who had the most training in there was the one that was also receiving the most feedback of how to retrain the voice to be present in the heart space, not in the mind. And that right there leveled the playing field for me. So thank you so much for bringing all of that to the surface for me to be able to revisit that. And for everybody that's listening to this, I'm trusting that through our stories that you're able to feel into the power of your own voice, that it's not about the perfection. It's not about hitting the perfect pitch or the perfect note, because in a lot of the devotionals and in historical and ancient texts, it's not about that. It's about how we utilize our heart to express and feel the resonance within our body, our mind, our heart, and our soul, so that we connect with the divine in that space. And you just so beautifully articulated that and brought that into the human experience. So thank you for that gift.
I was just about to thank you for articulating that so beautifully, because yeah, absolutely, that has been the liberation for me again and again, from this very mind-centered background, to come into the mantra, to come into the kirtan, to come into these fields where it's just about the heart and the human experience. And interestingly, you know, as we drop more into our hearts and our bodies, we can listen from a different place. You know, if we're listening from our minds, then we're analyzing and critiquing. But if we're in a group of people that are more heart and body centered, they receive us in a completely different way. And yeah, it's the biggest gift we can share.
Truly, truly is. Thank you.
There's one piece I'd love to drop in here. Just remembered, I literally read this yesterday, and it articulated something that I already thought, but so perfectly. It was talking about how natural human behaviors such as singing, dancing, and creating art have all become skills and things that we're supposed to be good at or practice or become perfect at, when actually all of them are simply parts of the human expression. You know, a bird makes sound. You can't sort of like say that bird's a singer and that bird's not a singer. And in the same way, we've kind of fragmented these aspects of our inherent beingness and put labels on them or us. And this is, yeah, such a big part of my passion, for us to reclaim our natural sound that is just an expression of our being.
Yeah. And it goes, and what you shared there, it reminds me of, we marvel at the glyphs, these ancient expressions on rock that my son could do, or a baby could do, right? But we marvel at them like they're the most beautiful thing, because they're an expression of what was being felt in that moment, and then we go to these bija mantras, or when, we let out a sigh. These expressions are so simple, and they're the most powerful ones because they're the closest to source. They're not designed to be perfect because they're perfect in and of themselves. So thank you for that. Yeah. There was something I want to come back to, and this may take us in a different direction, though when you were talking about it, it reminded me of something that I read on your website. And it was this quote that landed with me, was paradise is an inside job. And as you were speaking, I felt this paradise when you were talking about, the devotion and, just the heart-centeredness. And I know, and then you were also like the embodiment piece of it. And I know that's kind of where that part was leaning into, the embodied intimacy, which I would love to go down that pathway as well. Though maybe it'll go there. So talk to me about that paradise as an inside job. It's so powerful.
I love that you brought this up because actually, when I was lying in bed this morning reflecting on what I might share today, it's been such a gift that you've invited me because it's given me this sort of opportunity to kind of reflect and take stock, just as this conversation is giving me this amazing opportunity to review my journey. And I really landed back in this, what do I call it? Well, I'm going to say name for now. I think there's something better, which is Reclaim Eden, which is something that came to me 2 or 3 years ago. And I was using it as my Instagram handle, and then I changed it. But I was thinking, I need to get that domain name again, because it speaks to me of something so kind of core to everything that I'm exploring personally, but everything that what I feel is important for humanity. And it's interesting that the word Eden is in there, because as I said, I grew up very atheist, very kind of rebellious, didn't want anything to do with the Bible, had no sort of historical allegiance to or connection with that concept. But I really truly believe that we I mean, this, we're born perfect and complete, and we have this birthright of paradise, and that what I've learned through my journeys on the embodied intimacy training and with various other kind of apprenticeships I've been doing is how to understand more about my own nervous system, my limbic system in particular, and the mind, and how to there's a great John Milton quote, which is something like, let's see if I can pluck this out of the ether, maybe you know it, something like, there's no such thing as a heaven or hell, but only the mind can make it so. Or something,
Yeah,
I've paraphrased it terribly.
make a mind out of hell, or yeah.
Mind can make a
Yeah.
heaven. Oh, the mind can make a heaven of hell or hell of heaven, something like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Anyway, you get the point, which is that we really, through deeply returning to our bodies and our beings, can experience blissful states. I mean, this is what we're all searching for on our spiritual journeys, without, that are not reliant on external factors. And so, there's really this longing in me for myself, but also really what lights me up is sharing this kind of these doorways and these pathways for people to then follow down themselves, that lead us back to our birthright of paradise, of bliss, of peace, of a sense of I'm enough, everything's okay. These very, very simple kind of little slogans that I can throw out there. I think probably most people listening would agree that much of our life doesn't feel like that. We're not feeling okay. We're anxious about the state of the planet or our bank account or whatever it is. There's a lot of complexity in our lives, and we're not empowered with, I believe, the useful tools that would be really most useful. And really, my longing is that in primary schools, children are taught about the instincts, about fight, flight, freeze, fawn. They understand all this stuff. They get it like that. I've played around with my niece and nephew, and that if we could be taught how our nervous systems work and how our animal bodies work, and that there's no place for shame around the functions of our animal bodies. There's so much that we're taught to censor. We've been speaking mostly about voice today, but I often say on the embodiment classes that I lead every other week that, it's like, this isn't school. If you're farting or burping or yawning or sighing or laughing or crying, I'm like, yay, I'm doing my job. That's what
Right.
I
Our
want.
human expression in every way.
All of that, all of the stuff that you were not meant to do at school, please do it here. And if you're doing something else than what I'm telling you, yay, follow your own body, follow your wisdom, follow what you need to do. So don't do what I'm doing just because I'm the teacher. And so it's really like this, this invitation to reclaim. I just come back. That's where the word reclaim really kind of keeps landing. Reclaim your voice, reclaim your body, reclaim your inner Eden. And I have to say, this is a complete work in progress for me. It's not that I've achieved permanent inner paradise, but it's my passion, and I feel it's a human right, to be supported and, if needed, educated, but just kind of empowered and encouraged to I was going to say manage, but that doesn't sound like the right kind of word, but to hold ourselves with love, and to understand how we tick, and that it's not wrong, what's happening naturally. So often a traumatic experience is when our body responds perfectly. It shakes with terror, and someone says, "Don't do that, you look weird," or like, we're constantly sort of, in our culture, being taken away from our natural bodily expression. And my own experience is that the more I can settle back into embracing all of me, even when it's not what I think I want, that's where the paradise is.
And thank you for your humble expression of what you're of service to. When you had said, I'm not, this is still a learning experience for me. And then you reflected on the education system, right? Of where in the education system, we're not taught these things, the human experience, the basic fundamentals of the human experience. What I feel, where we are moving to, and what is so important in the work that you do, and I'm going to ask you about that here in a moment, is that we share from our human experience. We're not sharing necessarily, yes, we've studied, right? We've studied, we've mentored, we've, done the work, though it's really because of our life experience and the traumas, the challenges, the mental modifications that come into our awareness. And then we make choices, firm choices, that we want to move through those. So we educate ourselves, we practice. It's where the power lies. The power is in the practice. If we're not practicing it, we can't have a sense of permanency with that. It doesn't necessarily become embodied. It's the greatest idea that never materializes in physical form. So I really love, how you spoke to that, and that your journey has facilitated what it is that you are serving, because it's a passion project, as you mentioned, and it's a passion, and that passion lives on. Things that have been very prominent in my awareness, and one of my dear friends shared with me that she, and I'm adopting this myself, is she's at the stage of where it's about love and legacy. And that legacy is the passion. The passion has always been there, right? It was protected before. Now it's come alive. Now the gift is sharing that with others so that it can come alive with them. So I would love for you to share about your service, about the reclamation, about the somatic experiencing, about the resourcing, because there's one other thing that I want to share that was so beautiful, of when you were talking about like kind of tapping into the divine, is when we are moving through what we're moving through, we tend to tap into something that's beyond us, source, whatever that energetic is that is informing us of how isn't our job. The how is presented to us. We're responsible for the what do I need to do about it. So essentially we become a resource. So I love that is part of what you're of service to. So if you can just share with our audience how you serve and what is a little bit about your programs.
Wow, well, this is so sweet because when you invited me onto this podcast, I was just a big yes, and I didn't ask anything about when's it going to go out and where and what and how. I was just like, yeah. And then you subsequently shared that it's should be popping out pretty soon. And in fact, it hadn't occurred to me, but there's a run of this program resource that I have. I'll speak a bit more about, but that's actually coming up towards the end of October. So I'll maybe drop
Beautiful.
you over a link for that, because I think in a way this will probably answer your question. That, yeah, it kind of takes us almost back to where we started. So this is lovely. When I ran this retreat 6 or 7 years ago, the voice work, and I had this realization like, wow, I need to learn about trauma and I need to get more into my body, and I don't know how to do that. And I just had this prayer and this strong intention of like, okay, I want to put my voice work on hold and figure this stuff out before I open the doors again. And it took a couple of years, but I was guided to by, extraordinary mystical unfoldings. There were a couple at the time, Rachel Rickards and Buster Radvik, who founded something called Embodied Intimacy, which I've mentioned. And I ended up actually working with them for 2.5 years. I still work with them both, kind of ad hoc, but I got to do their year-long embodied intimacy training, which was literally the answer to my prayers. It was about relational trauma and embodiment. It was basically how to be a human with other humans. And it gave me all of this stuff, which I believe this is what I want to see in primary school, just these, like, I've been like not even knowing what I was searching all my life for, these simple tools to find out where my boundaries are and how to have boundaries and how to communicate and how to just breathe with another human. Just very simple, incredibly simple, but life-changing. And so I found myself, having this amazing journey with them. And 2 weeks after I graduated from that program, kind of full of enthusiasm and excitement about, these events, lockdown kicked in, and suddenly their whole business morphed. And we had been preparing some online stuff, but it just very quickly got transformed into this 6-week program, which was called Resource, and which is still called Resource and still running. And that came from what's needed right now. In this time of the pandemic, people are alone at home. There's a lot of fear and anxiety and all sorts of stuff. And it was like, what are the tools? What are the simple tools that you need to take care of yourself? And then how can we be together in this? So Resource was born out of that kind of more urgent need that was there in that time, but it's still a somewhat urgent need for a lot of people, all over the world ongoingly. And so it's continued to run periodically since 2020. And this may be the last run of it in its current form, because Rachel and Buster are kind of separating out their businesses at this point. But I kind of lost my thread of why this was connecting up. Yeah, it was kind of how I was longing for something for myself. And through that, I've been able to be of service I basically was very integral in creating the program in terms of editing videos and writing and bringing together a lot of the material. And I feel very much this deep love, like it's partly my love child, you know, though it's their body of work. And it's been such an exquisite gift for me to receive all of this learning, but then to be completely immersed in it through the editing of videos and the transcribing and all of that, so that I got this opportunity to really apprentice deeply. And now I'm at this point where, since May this year, I've been actually holding the group calls that once Buster and Rachel were holding, and now they've invited me in to hold, and it's happened so kind of elegantly and gently that I've been brought along on this current. And I feel utterly, humbly grateful and delighted to be of service in this way. Every week that I show up on those calls, I get to witness people lighting up or having a huge aha moment or just experiencing relief and gratitude. And it's so nourishing for me. And it's my practice, because to hold those calls, I need to be walking the talk, or I need to be embedded in that, and it keeps me inspired, because every week I need to, you know, come up with a new theme. And so it is really this beautiful symbiotic service that serves me. And just to finish this off, I think maybe the biggest learning I've had as a facilitator since May is that Rachel and Buster have a very particular style that, when I first met them, blew me away. That they hold space in a very vulnerable, very human, like warts and all, this is me, I'm not perfect way. And when I used to watch them, I would be kind of cringing, thinking, oh God, I could never be so honest and so vulnerable in front of a, you know, because sort of through my yoga teaching, I'd somehow learned to have a bit of a mask and to hide a bit behind that. And also, as a yoga teacher, people can project a lot of expecting you to be perfect. And I kind of went with that and let them, you know, let them believe that. And so this has been an amazing training for me in really learning how to bring myself very raw, very vulnerable, sometimes really edgy. And I really see that the more I bring myself humbly and humanly, the more of a gift it is to those that are coming. So there's all sorts of themes there. So that's one piece that's very alive right now. As I said, I have been running this 6-month container that's on pause, because I'm part of this reimagining process that's kind of morphing, and I'm not ready to relaunch that. And I have this voice work container that's not quite ready to birth, but it's going to be birthing soon. That is what I've kind of referred to throughout this conversation, a safe container, very much a devotional container that's calling in that divine mother compassion. And my sense is that it's for kick-ass women that, you know, like they're CEOs, or they're, you know, like they're rocking it in their niche, but the idea of singing in front of another human is, you know, floors them. And there's so many women I meet who are living with that kind of, what's the word? Sort of like something out of integrity here. Like I can speak at that, you know, I can launch that, I can talk there, I can do this, I can rock that business meeting, or I can, you know, like whatever it is, but singing from your heart in front of other humans, you know, it's so exposing, it's so vulnerable. And I sort of started to realize, I used to work, yeah, just primarily with people who are terrified to sing, and that's still my passion. But I got really excited because I'm on this facilitation training that I'm assisting at the moment, which is called The Field, and it's exquisite. And there are these incredible women on there that have so much power, But there are a few of them that really are not comfortable with their voice, and I'm like, I want to hear, I want, like selfishly, I want to bring that out, but also, wow, what wonder will you be bringing through then? You're already so extraordinary and so expressed and so, competent and gifted. And I know from my own journey that when the voice activation happens and when that part is switched on, it just powers up everything. The whole creative expression of the being is given a whole new, upgrade. I know I don't need to explain that to you. So yeah, something's cooking and it's not quite landed yet.
Love it. And when you were talking, with the work with the Divine Mother energy, and there's, with the shift in our work culture of, women have been so strong in the masculine, right? And the work that you're speaking to is reactivating and reclaiming and remembering that divine feminine energy of where it's been so purpose driven, it has been so directionally focused, that to draw that back into the crucible of the heart, like you said, imagine what happens then. What
Exactly.
that
It's
expression is go.
like, yeah,
Like,
yes.
so thank you for that.
There's also
Yeah,
another piece I'd love to just drop in
please,
quickly.
absolutely.
I'm glad you just crystallized with the divine feminine that for me, the divine mother, the body, the earth, there's a thread that I grew up very disconnected from those. I had no conscious connection really. Well, I mean, I did appreciate nature, but I grew up in London and I was mostly in cities. And for me, um, when we tend trauma, we tend to leave our bodies because it's just too painful to stay in there. And when we're not in our bodies and we abandon our bodies, we kind of, I think, almost can't help but abandon the earth. And what I see, just my own idea, is a kind of endemic situation of humans that are kind of hovering up in their heads, really afraid to feel what's going on down here, without the tools to know how to be with that, without the community around them that can hold them in it in a loving way. It's not to blame anyone. And that we kind of can't help but to disconnect from the planet and Mother Nature as well. And so for me, the Divine Mother energy is bringing through this profound healing of returning to the body and through reclaiming our own inner Eden. That's how Eden reappears on the planet, like inevitably. If we could all make it our number one priority to return to our own inner paradise, I feel like inevitably paradise will be what we see outside, because if we're fully in our bodies and present, we just want to steward and be of service to our mother nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Nature, it's natural. Yeah. So beautiful. So with your programs that you're offering, they're so needed in our world, uh, especially in our current state of affairs of reclaiming the inner paradise, remembering our body, and activating our voice, our true voice, not the one that we're told to have or anything like that, but our true voice, the essence of it, whatever that is in its divine perfection. Um, I would love for you to share where our listeners can find you on the internet, where your programs are. I'm going to have them in the show notes, but if you can share with us where you could be found, that would be a tremendous gift for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Oh, it's been such a treat sharing all of this with you and having such a reflection. So I'll probably need to spell my name, although I guess it'll be on there. But so VaishnaviBrassey.com is my website, and Vaishnavi Brassey is my handle on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. So it's VAISHNAVI, and Brassey, BRASSEY. And yeah, I think that's good. There's also earthmantra.net, which is the sacred mantra duo that I been singing with for some years. So that's another place you can find an album of music very much dedicated to the divine feminine and actually to the creative birthing process, which you mentioned earlier at one point. And yeah.
Thank you for that. And please do check out Vaishnavi's work on earthmantra.net. And then your senses are going to come alive. As my recommendation is, put on headphones, close your eyes, lay down, and just let it take over. It's powerful. It's a prayer. It's a prayer that has been put into musical expression, and it's absolutely beautiful. Divine transmission of heartfelt devotional mantra music. I mean, it's literally what it is. And to work with Vaishnavi, definitely check out our website, because when you read through it, there's going to be a personal connection that you're going to feel. If you haven't felt it already, and if you haven't felt it already, my gosh, I invite you to re-listen to this because the power of the personal story and how we move through our story to rewrite it in the most divinely orchestrated way. So thank you once again. And to close this out, I ask all of my guests, if there is anything within you that you have learned throughout your human experience, what is it that you think that we can do as humans to support a more sustainable and harmonious world? Essentially, how can we be better together?
Oh, I absolutely love this question. And in a way, I feel I may be repeating myself, but it's a great opportunity to sort of crystallize, I guess, what I've been sharing, which is I really, maybe I'll say something that might be a little bit contentious because I don't say it lightly, but I kind of say it a little bit provocatively. I don't say it lightly because my partner was involved in a human rights, setting up a human rights organization in Mexico, the first organization that was there, and clearly there's some incredibly important issues of human rights there that need to be addressed. And so I'm not negating that, but I do have this sense that there's a human rights issue here, which is that to access clean air, clean water, clean food, it's very, very difficult for most of us in the modern world to do this. I'm incredibly blessed. I've recently moved to live off-grid in a very untouched part of West Wales. And I think this has been a dream of 20 years, and I finally manifested this. And it's really brought alive for me a longing for everyone to be able to access this. And so I guess this ties in with my paradise theme, that I really believe that as much as we can take it to heart, the importance of dropping back into our bodies, of slowing down, of being with the breath, of embracing even what feels very uncomfortable, then that just allows us to show up differently with those around us. And if we can do that collectively, I have a sense we're creating a very different reality, and that there's a very direct connection with these sort of basic birthrights that that I really want for everyone. and and that when you spoke earlier about the voice, it's almost, sometimes I don't like using the word voice around reclaiming voice. It's like reclaiming our sound.
Mm.
Because when we hear the word voice, we think immediately about singing and have sort of ideas, but it's like a cow moves as and when it wants to. It doesn't censor, it doesn't have any worry about that. And I would love for us all to be residing in our beings and our bodies to such an extent that we're naturally sounding. And I can't say that I'm there yet a lot of the time, and it depends who I'm with and the situation. So I guess all that to say, I've touched on a number of things, but it's really how to be more natural, how to be more natural in our bodies, with each other, and in the earth, and with nature. Yeah,
Harm.
thank you for that question.
Absolutely.
Really.
Thank you for your answer. It's the simple things to have access to, our basic fundamental rights to sustain life.
Mhm.
And when we have those, kind of makes things a little bit easier. You know, it's like when you were talking about paradise being an inside job, we have to first do the work within and we experience it throughout. So thank you for that. That was a really beautiful way to bring this container and what we have shared in this conversation that I hold so dearly to my heart, because there's so many things that you spoke to, you know, as we've shared, like, oh my gosh, you know, we have, you know, sharing the same parallels in our lives, and how we're of service and what lights us up. So thank you. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much for a beautiful conversation, for sharing your passion, your heart, your purpose, and more than anything else, for your presence, you know, for showing up in this incarnation, because I firmly believe that, you know, the work that we are doing, that's the reason why the show is called Reverberations, is so that it ripples out and that it echolocates whoever is in need, or maybe they don't even know that they're in need, and it strikes a chord within them where that discord is shifted into harmony, of where their soul song starts to come alive and they remember exactly what they came here for. And even if they don't know, there's now a reference point to be able to reflect upon. And so thank you for being that beacon. It's an honor.
Oh, John, really, it's deeply, deeply reciprocated, that gratitude and that honor. And likewise, there's many little threads that I want to follow up on because we have so many parallels. But I deeply appreciate the sincerity and the thoughtfulness with which you meet the world, and the integrity with which, you know, I experienced through working on the music with you, and now in this conversation. It's really precious, and I'm so delighted to have this conversation with you, and it's lit up all sorts of threads for me. So thank you.
I'm excited to see what comes forward in the future for you and for us and for the collective. Though I'm really excited to share, as a perfect segue to close this out. We spoke of at the beginning of a project that Deb Stanley, who is going to be a future guest, we're doing the recording on Monday morning, so it will most likely be the one to follow up, which would be a perfect follow. So you'll have even a greater understanding and landing of the work that Vaishnavi and I were blessed to be a part of. So without further ado, we're going to bring this session here to a close, and we're going to share the song. And song is, I don't even know if that even does it justice, because I feel that this was created from something beyond and that was brought in because it essentially is the queen code for quantum womb healing. If there is actually, I want to reflect this back to you, Vaishnavi, if there's anything that you would like to share. Actually, you know what? Let's rewind a little bit. Let's talk about the creative process of this for a moment. I feel that needs to come alive. So can you just share about the creative process of this and what this means for you?
Thank you. Yes, it's so interesting to hear you struggle with the word song, because I've been talking about this track to people because I haven't been able to use the word song, but track isn't right either. And I've really struggled, like, what is this? It's some transmission of something
Yeah.
elsewhere, and I don't know how to contain it with words. Um, what I found myself writing about after this track, this transmission came through, was I was almost going to say this is something I've been working on, and then I paused and I'm like, no, I haven't been working on it, it's been working me.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would say that from the moment Debs reached out to me and asked if I was open to bring through some vocals for anchoring the Queen codes, I was an immediate yes. I've worked with Debs for years. I love her, and I just knew that I wanted to be part of that. But it's been working me, and there's a lot. We could do another whole podcast on that process. So I'll just try and crystallize it briefly. In a nutshell, I would say that immediately what I came up against was my own inferiority, or not good enoughness, and feeling like I haven't really anchored the queen archetype in my own self, and how can I possibly be charged with this mission when I'm not embodying it. And I really went into a lot of my own self-doubt and fear, and the gift was that saying yes to this mission essentially landed something in me that like I had to open to invite in a sovereignty into my own body and soul and being, from which this could come through. And my mind was very active and fighting the whole way through. I haven't had quite such an experience of recording with anything else, because there was so much kind of fear activation. It was quite loud, and I had to really keep grounding in and centering in and staying steady on my internal throne, is how I put it, finding this queen within. And there's been so much magic and extraordinary sort of mystical, weaving with the collaboration. It was such an absolute joy to meet you through this process. John and I had literally exchanged a few WhatsApp text messages. We knew nothing about each other, but we dove straight into this very deep collaboration, and that's kind of how we met, which is extraordinary. And it did feel quite vulnerable on one level to be sending off these vocals to someone I really didn't know, and yet I felt completely was aligned, and there was a sense of it, the perfection. And there's just one other piece that I wanted to catch. I wonder if it's going to come back, whether I've lost it. No, it seems to have gone. I was just going to speak into the Lydian. I don't know if that's just because we did touch
Please.
on the musical modes. And so when I spoke about Chloe Goodchild, introducing me to the musical modes, she spoke into one called the Lydian, which maybe you can correct me, John, but as far as I understood it in musical terms, it's kind of the most open. It's the least flat. It's kind of the most sort of open scale, and Chloe associates the Lydian with fearlessness. And so when I was tapping into this, something dropped into my mind, like, oh, maybe the Lydian needs to be in here. Like, that sounds like the quality of a queen. It sort of came as a mental concept, and then I just let myself play with that interval. And what came through with this, I'll call it a mantra, Awaken, is, well, it comes from the Aramaic Lord's Prayer, so it's not strictly probably the right word for it, but I experience it as a powerful mantra. Um, it came out kind of like a wolf howl with that particular musical interval and that particular ow sound. And it was just extraordinary. And that's just one little piece of the kind of magic that I felt coming through that really wasn't anything I was trying to create. So, yeah, I'll leave it there. There's much more I could say, but it was an absolute gift, that process that I got taken through.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. We could definitely do a whole podcast on that. I'm this isn't about me and my process, though I do want to reflect one thing is that
Please.
I share that as well. Of when I was asked, I was like, who am I to hold the container for the divine feminine and bring through a queen code? What have I done to deserve this? You know, to be put essentially on the 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 king's throne to hold the divine feminine. And one of my colleagues shared something with me in a meeting last year, a year ago to date almost, is that the masculine energetic is essentially the ocean floor. As long as I, as the producer of the music, I am holding that ocean floor, I'm providing the ocean floor. And if I can provide that gift and trust in it, and I love how you spoke about the Lydian, is essentially it's bringing forward the mystical. It's bringing forward that mystical energy. And if I can dissolve into the space to allow something that is beyond me to come through and not get in the way, then maybe I'll be able to do this. And this was my first time of doing an overseas collaboration,
Me too.
right? Um, my first time of really bringing something of this magnitude. And when I say magnitude, it's because of the intentionality of it. Um, and uh, the the sacred responsibility for the integrity of holding that container for the queen code to come through in its absolute expression. And when I heard your recording, I was floored. When you say that it wasn't me working, it worked me, that is exactly, I shared with Debs that I literally put this, I laid down the first time after the completion or the first iteration of it. I laid in bed and I played it and I had it on repeat. And it was a prayer every single time. And there was an activation every single time. And the harmonics and the toning and the vocalization that you brought through with that is otherworldly, truly otherworldly. And it's an honor to share this with everyone. And the invitation here is to close your eyes, to lay down and have headphones on or have really good speakers. Though headphones is definitely the recommendation. So it's allowed to go beyond the sensory distraction. Though this, Abun, most definitely, I highly recommend if you're driving, maybe this isn't the best time to listen to it. I'm going to just be straight up real with that. You might end up entranced, and I don't want to be responsible for anything at all. So, yeah, if you're operating heavy machinery, not the time. Not the time. Is there any last words that you would like to share before we drop into sharing Abun with everyone? No.
Just in awe and appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you. I love you dearly, sister. It's been an absolute honor to share this time together. So thank you for your time and your gifts and your energy and your service. So everyone, without further ado, we're about to share Abun for the first time in a public setting. So it is my deep honor and gratitude for having you here today, Vaishnavi. And for everyone in the audience, I love you dearly. And remember, we are better together.